Hey gang, a little late to the party on this one. I wanted to talk about a couple things. I was mostly waiting for the best in show skin to pop up here. I've been running Night Runner on Cloud Runner basically as long as I've had the MSR. But I was always Team Belligerent Duck in that little thing, and the best in show skin is actually Carnival Colors, kind of. Although this is a little bit more metallic red than I would normally like, but it's still pretty cool. So that was one thing I was going to check out. The other thing I was going to do is that apparently now that I'm a content creator, there is a issue going around the community right now that I feel like I have an opinion on. So like a little vampire bat, I've got to go and spit my numbing saliva on it and then sink my fangs in and then just suck it dry until it's a husk, because that's what I do, because I'm a professional. And I get paid a lot of money from YouTube. But the issue people have been talking about, as I'm sure you are aware, is everybody's kind of talking with the drop of the galaxy about how CIG is kind of predatory with their ship sales, with the concept sales, how they do things, how they're not building ships, what's going on, why are there so many ships on the backlog. And while some of this is valid, some of it is kind of misconceptions. And I was going to kind of go into why with just kind of a broader view. So I am just going to fly out to Hurston, as I usually do. Apparently we're going to be getting a PTU patch in the nearish future. So hang on one second while I set up that jump. And what I am going to do, unfortunately this has an upgraded jump drive in it, so it'll go pretty quick through this, so that will keep me from blabbing too much. But what I was going to talk about was concept ships, just kind of the way CIG is going into this process, and then kind of an elephant in the room that I haven't noticed a lot of people talking in. And in fact, that's going to be the title of this one, is going to be the elephant in the room. But first I kind of want to talk about a lot of the things that other people are kind of bringing up and just kind of give my sort of take on it. So the first thing is that art, design, writing, all of that is going to range way far ahead of the actual game, like the actual engine, the programming, the mechanics, all of that. When I was making my own game, I had the entire design doc written, which was something like 800 pages, and the entire plot written, which was another 800 pages. I had hundreds of ships designed, like probably 200 to 300 ships, how they'd all fit together, how they'd work. I had probably 120 ships that were already an engine, and to give you an idea, this is back in '99, and the programmer was all like, okay, before I can make this thing, I don't even know how many triangles this engine will eventually take, so keep them to 100 polys. So I did what I could with 100 polys. So hang on a second while I jump, because it's going to be loud, typically.
Quantum travel engaged.
Okay, now that we're past that. So art and design will always run faster than the actual program. And especially in a game like Star Citizen, where not only are you just building the exterior of the ship like you would with most space games, like Elite Dangerous, it's not an entire interior of a ship, it's this. So you might be able to look around and see this, but it's basically a dashboard, and then the rest of the ship, it doesn't matter what it looks like because you're not walking around on it. In Star Citizen, you have to walk around in it. It has to be fully realized, so the outside has to match the inside. You can't just Millennium Falcon that stuff. So Star Citizen has kind of built themselves a bigger problem right off the bat on any ship that has an interior. So anything larger than pretty much an arrow has an interior to the ship that you have to be able to walk around in. So not only do they have to design this, they have to design, let's see if I can actually look behind me, all of that back there too. And it has to fit, and it has to look good in first person. So right off the bat, Star Citizen is a bigger problem than most space simulators get. So that's one issue, is the ships are more complex, so it takes longer to make them. If they were just making the exterior of the ship, which is pretty, I want to look at this skin, way easier to do. They could be busting out a new ship every month if they did that. So ships in Star Citizen are always going to take longer to build, and the bigger they are, the more complex those interiors are, the longer it's going to take to make those ships. That's always going to be the case, no matter how streamlined the pipeline gets. So, moving on from there, so why is, knowing this, why is CIG still sell ships? Why do they still sell big ships? So, right now, the only game we have is the Persistent Universe. Squadron 42 is out there, but it's not here yet. So the only way CIG can fund this project moving forward is by selling us stuff and getting new money to come in, which is why they've kind of been locking down cross-chassis upgrades to the CCU game for buying up new ships and stuff like that. And I think that means we've passed the halfway point. Oh no, we're almost there. So obviously I'm going to talk a little bit longer than it's going to take me to get there. But that's the other reason, is that ships fund this game. And they also have skins and stuff like that, and they're trying to think of other ways to do it, but ship sales are what are paying all of those devs' salaries to make this game, and honestly keep making ships. So that's another issue. So let us go. Where do we want to go? Well, first of all, we gotta wait for that to track down. So, ship sales. They're never gonna stop selling ships. Even when they've released Squadron 42, even when this game is gold and has been for 30 years or something, they're never gonna stop selling ships, because that is how they do it. But once you buy your starter pack, you have zero obligation to buy another ship. So it is kind of, I'm going to look around for a mining station, so hang on, I'll bring it back once I've found one that's on the site side. We'll go stand up. Oh, that's my ship. Okay, I guess I just entered the atmosphere. So they're never going to stop making those ships. They're never going to stop selling ships. There's always going to be a little bit of lag between them selling a concept and making it in-game, usually, unless it's a straight-to-flyable ship, which I'll get into that in the sort of second half of this video. So beyond that, so one of the things that CIG has realized, that selling ships like, let's say, the Reclaimer, which is just going to get its first gameplay, or its game loop is coming in with 318. So the first time it'll be able to do anything that was designed for will be in probably less than a month. But it has been a concept ship, I want to say since, or not a concept ship, it's been in-game as a flyable asset since 2016 or 2017, so quite a few years. And you'll notice almost no one flies Reclaimers around. It's certainly not going to be their daily driver, because there's no reason. There's other ships that run cargo better, which is one of the only game loops that's really in right now outside of combat. There's certainly other better combat ships. It's a big, slow, ponderous vessel, and granted, it's cool because it looks like a Nostromo on the inside, but there's no point to it. So CIG kind of realized that releasing ships with no purpose in the game was kind of mean-spirited because there wasn't really anything you could do with them but walk around in your hangar. And if they were going to do that, they might as well have just left the game in the hangar module. So having the game loop in the game, that was kind of a decision that I agree with that CIG made about a year or two back, where they're like, you know, we're not going to release the ships until their actual game loop is in the game, like until they have a purpose, which I agree with. Another issue is kind of mechanics. So you've got something, and that's related to... Did I fly by this thing? Oh no, it's up there. Okay. So mechanics are kind of related to game loops, but not always. Think about, you could have something like the Vulcan, which is kind of your AAA repair, refuel, tow truck kind of ship, which you could technically put in the game right now because we do have refueling, but a lot of the focus of that ship is kind of all the utility that goes around it. So not only refueling, but it's also about repair and drones and stuff like that. So they're probably not going to roll that ship out, even given that it's kind of in a perfect little size category, and I'll kind of get there in a second. That the actual, all of its mechanics aren't really in. So you think about the Carrack right now. The Carrack, its big purpose in the game is mapping jump points. There aren't any jump points in the game right now. There will be when they drop Pyro, but Pyro's probably dropping... I've been saying... I do like the new and improved way of getting out of the MSR rather than going through the tunnel. But, I mean, the Carrack basically doesn't have any of its game loops in. You could run, again, you could run cargo in it. You actually can do combat in it. It's a pretty effective combat ship, but that's not its purpose. It's an exploration ship, and none of that's in the game. So when I say mechanics, I think I want to actually pull a little bit further forward. Hopefully I can jump in this thing. I'm going to find out. This could be a colossal mistake. Oh, this could be bad. Alright, so we're going to find a way around this. Troubleshooting. One day we'll have a landing camera. And so mechanics are important too. So you want the mechanics, you want the game loops in there. That just makes better gameplay. So there's a lot of ships on that backlog that kind of fall into that category. Their game loop isn't in, or their mechanics aren't in, or both. Usually both. And so one of the reasons they're kind of sitting out there, no matter how popular they are, is because they would basically just sit in the game without purpose. You wouldn't be able to do all the things with them, so they'd basically just be there for eye candy.
Hi.
There we go. So yeah, so that's one reason a lot of these ships, and even my beloved Banu Merchantman, is sitting sort of in that sort of category. It's a hugely, hugely popular ship, and that's one of the reasons I think CIG started development on it, is because it's just so popular. It was concepted, or at least they had their concept sail in either 2013 or 2014. But you think about it, and the actual mechanics of that ship aren't really in yet, in the sense that you've got stores on it, and so half the utility of the Banu Merchantman isn't in the game yet. Like, you wouldn't, we don't have stores in the game that player run stores. They don't exist. Turn on. There we go. So you'd be bringing it in, and again, it would just be a gigantic cargo ship. And yeah, it would be a really cool cargo ship, and one that people have asked for. And I mean, it's got these big-ass guns that would make it pretty cool. But not only is that not necessarily in the game, but also you think about the actual cargo mechanics, that the game itself can't really handle that much cargo. It's the same reason that they're kind of holding off bringing in the whole sea, is the economy isn't ready for it yet. That we need Quana working and everything else before we can actually bring a ship like that into the game. So again, mechanics and game modes. So those are some of the reasons why you see much older ships. Just jump on. There we go. That's why you see much older ships that are just kind of languishing on the roadmap, because just they don't have the gameplay in yet. So I kind of beat that one to death. But so going on, if you look at kind of concepts, I'll get to this in part 2. It's easier to make small ships than it is to make big ones. So that seems obvious, but you think about that. In the last year, most of the ships that CIG has released, at least the ones that have been straight to flyable, even over the last couple of years, basically since they kind of made the focus or refocus to Squadron 42 development over the VU development, most of the vehicles that we've been getting in game have been smaller vehicles. So 1 to 2 people, not very complex. Of course, there are exceptions to that. You have things like the Corsair, but the Corsair has been in development for a little while. Scoot forward just a hair. Yeah, stop. Now we're gonna check it. Yeah, there we go. All right. So it's easier to make smaller ships. So you're not going to see bigger ships because it's easier to... Sorry, that'll never get old. Kind of hope they keep that. It's not a bug, it's a feature. I have to walk through all those always. See if I can get back into this bad boy. I don't think I can. And so smaller ships are easier to make than bigger ships. So they're going to tend to favor the smaller ships right now because it's easier to take one developer and drop it on making something like the 100i than it is to take... You could take 5 developers and have them make 5 ships that are the size of the 135C, or you could take 5 developers, drop them on something the size of the BMM, and it would probably still take longer than to make that thing, just because you're talking about the interior and everything else. So that's another reason to build smaller ships rather than bigger ships. And if you'll notice, a lot of the ships on the backlog are bigger ships. So hang on just a second, I'm going to spawn up my rock.
Welcome to the ASOP Vehicle Retrieval System.
Okay, and so that's the other issue, is you've got basically bigger ships. You got to make the whole interior. It has to match up to the exterior. It all has to fit together. Bigger ships are more complicated. So a lot of the bigger ships, the Polaris, the Orion, even though we've got mining in the game, the Orion's a lot like the BMM in the fact that, yes, you have that game loop in the game, but not to the scale that would justify bringing in that ship. So it kind of applies. And finally, you've got things like style guides. There's a few manufacturers out there, the Banu included, where there's 1 or 2 ships out there, like especially with the Banu Merchantman. The only example we have, and the only example the devs have of the Banu style, is the Banu Defender. And again, much easier to make a small ship than a big one. And so I just freaked out because there's 2 ships on the radar. They're both mine. I'm an idiot. That's what happened. So yeah, so the problem is style guide now. Sneak past my ship. is if you've got a really well-established style guide, and there are only a couple ship manufacturers that actually have this now, that I can think of offhand. RSI has a pretty good one now. Drake has a really good, well-established style guide. And Crusader has a really good style guide that's kind of established. So RSI, Crusader, and Drake are all pretty well established. Like CIG has enough of their asset packs that they can make those ships very quickly. Probably Aegis is in there because they there's quite a few Aegis ships. I'm trying to think if there's Aegis ships with an interior. I think there is. It's the Retaliator one, but those might be a little bit older. Anvil, same story. But you can kind of get a sense that there's some of these things where the style guide just isn't there yet. And they have to build out those asset packs. So, I mean, they need all of these hallways and these chairs and the control panels and all of that before they can actually start building those ships faster. So the pipeline is not as fast for some of those ships. And now I'm going to get into the elephant in the room. So hang tight, we're going to switch into the real world. So welcome to the real world. So where we're going to start right now is Reddit. And this is actually kind of what inspired this. So I'm not going to call out, and actually if I can block out this guy's name, I will. But this was a response they had to me. Now, the elephant in the room, as far as development goes, all the reasons I gave are reasons why ship development is slow. The other reason is that CIG has shifted their focus from running in tandem with the Persistent Universe and Squadron 42 to a tight focus on Squadron 42. And I'm going to get to why in a second, but the reason why I felt like this was an important topic was because of this comment right here. So they say, the problem I have with them being laser focused, this is in response to me. So I said laser focused, and they're just responding to it. Focused on Squadron 42 is the lack of any tangible evidence to back that claim up. There's plenty of evidence. For years, that is what we have been told. We were told a long time ago that QA had played it all the way through. We were told that release was imminent. We haven't seen anything since those proven lies to back up the fact that all resources are working on Squadron 42 at all. Okay, so what happened there was Tyler Wicken, who's one of the community managers, had said that he had played Squadron 42 all the way through. What he meant was he had played a white box version of the game, which means he was walking down blocked out, literally blocked out corridors that would say, go here, and as opposed to trying to do the whole puzzle thing to unlock the door, they just have like a generic button. They're just kind of trying to lay out the plot. Think of it as kind of writing the outline for a book. That's kind of what they're doing. So that's what Tyler Wicken played. He didn't actually play Squadron 42 that we're going to see in 2024? 2025? I'm thinking probably 2025. At least if my go no go theory is correct. I'm thinking they're going to have a go no go and to go to beta this month, but we'll see if I'm right on that. It just kind of feels like they're talking about Squadron 42 more. But anyway, so Squadron 42 is kind of the elephant in the room. And I'm going to show a couple videos here. And I'm going to heavily edit them down, but I'll put them down in the down below part so you can get the full context if you want to watch the whole thing. And I'll timestamp them to the relevant part where they're talking about Squadron 42. So just to kind of give you a quick preview, CIG, both Richard Tyrer and Chris Roberts have both said a few times we're kind of shifting focus to Squadron 42. And let's go ahead and watch these two sort of heavily edited videos and then come back to me and I'll kind of wrap this thing up.
While the Star Citizen universe is a sandbox, it's a big, it's open, wide sandbox. Squadron 42 is and this may seem obvious, but for new people who have joined the project recently, maybe it's not. Is a very a directed experience. It's a streamlined experience. We're telling a specific story for a single player adventure, and a lot of that. And while it's at its heart, it's a space sim. There's a lot of outer space stuff. There is a significant amount of FPS gameplay in Squadron 42.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, to be honest, if you took Squadron 42 is basically a giant mission inside Star Citizen. That's what it is. And the Star Citizen vision is that the flight and the FPS are supposed to be a cohesive experience. And right now in Star Citizen, we have the vehicles and we have the experience, but we don't have the combined experience yet. And that's because we're moving all the pieces in. And, at the moment you're going, well, I can kind of think where we're going, but what is it yet? And that's where we're going. Okay, no, we know what the end vision is. This is what Chris has, been working towards. And that's what we're kind of building. In Squadron, we kind of know what the A to B is because it's less sandbox orientated. And so we can prove out the mechanics in a much simpler fashion on Squadron and make them fit for purpose there, but they can still be accessible and utilized within the PU because they're exactly the same features. To be honest, it's about greasing the wheels. We're removing bureaucracy essentially, and I don't mean that in that previous way was a bad way. More to just it's like, how do we improve the communication, the flow of that information? We're 700 people working on 2 projects. There's across five or six studios in terms of location. There's a significant undertaking in terms of making sure that the vision is clear, that the game we're making, is made in a collaborative manner, not a design by committee manner kind of thing. And I think there's a very distinct difference there where, it's not everybody voting. And then, we're trying to make a singular vision because that's how you achieve excellence. And that singular vision has to be unified across all of these people and all of these pillars and all of these different disciplines. And that's hard enough when it's just a 30-man team or a 5-man team in one location. Healing, we've got all of these different mechanics of body dragging and stealth gameplay and radio and scanning and physical damage and fire and all of those things. And you go, okay, well, this is what we can do. And it start giving them the ingredients that the level designers can use. And obviously then me helping those guys and supporting them to make these fantastical levels that kind of fit into this overarching game.
So let's put this in in kind of like a diagram form to try to. I'm a very visual person. I think it'll help people to understand
Sure.
what this is if we put it in a visual.
Yeah, because it's probably quite complicated. Me just talking about it. It's
previously there's the actor feature team, and the actor feature team had one leg in the persistent universe and the other leg in Squadron 42, like Jean-Claude Van Damme at the top on top of those 2 18-wheelers in that commercial.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now with this reorganization, that's really what we're talking about here. The actor feature team now flows directly into Squadron 42, and then when it completes its work on features for Squadron 42, then those features get handed over to the persistent universe.
Yes, and that's something that I think is very. The way I put it is that the core gameplay pillar, because it's not just actor feature teams, the core gameplay pillar, which actor feature team is probably the largest team on there, was Squadron prioritized, but PU focused. And now we are Squadron prioritized and Squadron focused, and we will be focusing on delivering those features to Squadron 42, proving them out, rounding them out, and then giving them to the content teams, which we would have done previously on the PU for them to implement those features into the PU unit, into the live release.
Okay.
Now,
are we going to talk a little bit about Squadron 42? Is that what we're doing right now?
Both me and Rich have been heads down working really hard on Squadron as well as helping out on the PU. There's a huge amount of work that we're doing on Squadron that is going to make a massive difference to Star Citizen, the PU, and we wanted maybe to talk about some of the things that we're doing, because I know a lot of people say, well, everyone's working on Squadron, no one's working on the PU, and that's not really true, because a huge amount of the core gameplay that we're working on Squadron is specifically being built not just for Squadron, but to benefit the PU, and we're just doing it in sort of the test kitchen of Squadron to allow us to really, polish and make sure the features work well without having to be caught up in the sort of quarterly release cycle that you have on the PU, because we were finding it was hard for us to really finish the features out. You know, we'd get a tier 0 out, and then it would just sort of sit around for a while because everyone was rushing on to the next set of features they wanted to do. And for Squadron, obviously, it's shipping as a final polished AAA title, so everything needs to be really put together, working really well, and playing great. And so we're trying in the setup that we're doing now to do that for the features that we've identified that we need to make sure works really well for Squadron, but also will play across into the PU. And
okay, so with that in mind, what they're saying is, maybe I don't want to say disingenuous, but it's a hair misleading. What they are trying to do right now is get Squadron 42 out the door. And so they're kind of hinting to that, but they don't want to turn off the people playing the persistent universe. Because right now, there's a little bit of confirmation bias going on with the community saying, I don't want Squadron 42. Well, yeah, because the only game anyone is playing right now is the persistent universe. There is no Squadron 42 to play yet. So, of course, the vast majority of people are going to be pro PU because it's the only thing we've played. But the advantage of Squadron 42 is that it'll have broader appeal. There's a lot of people out there, myself included, that don't really want to play massively multiplayer games. This will be one of the first massively multiplayer games that I've wanted to play because it's the one that I wanted to make back in the day. It has all the elements of the only type of MMO that I would ever play. So one of the problems that Star Citizen has as an entire project is that it's a niche of a niche of a niche. And so what am I getting at there? So you have sort of a sci-fi space genre, which is a niche. And then you have a flight simulator, which is a niche. And then you have a first-person shooter, which is a niche. And then you kind of have the crossover between the first-person shooter and the flight simulator, but you have people who just want the flight simulator that don't want the first-person shooter, and you have people that just want the first-person shooter without having a flight simulator. So a niche of a niche of a niche. So they're already cutting that pie pretty tight. They're getting a pretty small slice of that pie. This game will never be Pokemon Go. It won't have that broad of appeal. So the way they have to make their money, they got to find ways to make money either with ship sales or with selling a game like Squadron 42. Because Squadron 42 isn't just going to be Squadron 42. They'll come out with special missions, like what was going on behind the scenes. They did that with Wing Commander. Privateer was a Wing Commander spinoff. And Squadron 42 and Star Citizen will be no different. They'll have games that'll be like, if they wanted to, they could make like a single player mining game. If you've got ship or Free Space Shipbreaker or whatever it was, Shipbreaker is basically a salvage game. Star Citizen could do that. You start on a reclaimer and you're out in the verse and you've got like a single player storyline. Once the engine is made, they have all the ships, they have all the assets, they'll have the AI. They can just keep rolling these games out every couple of years and just kind of keep milking that crowd, just to kind of be blunt about it. So Squadron 42 is a huge, huge, huge deal, even if you have zero interest in ever playing it. If it's a successful game, and this is one of the reasons that Chris is so focused on and so focused on the polishing, is Cyberpunk is pretty much recovered now, and they've kind of made their money back. But it took them, 2 or 3 years, or at least 2 years, to kind of get that groundswell of, hey, this is actually kind of a good game. I mean, I didn't buy it at launch because everybody's like, this thing's a horror show. But if you get good press and it's successfully reviewed, all of this negative press, all of these Kotaku articles, they're going to go away and they're all going to be like, oh, we always thought Star Citizen was going to be amazing. Check out this amazing game. And they'll want to be on the good side. And that'll bring in more players, and it may bring in more players to the PU, and that's good for all of us, because the more players that are playing the game, the more longevity it'll have, the more incentive CIG has to keep making the game. So Squadron 42 is a huge deal. And the final piece of Squadron 42 is, at this point, we're funding the development of Squadron 42. Hopefully at a certain point, that'll flip. And sales of Squadron 42 will fund the development of the PU. Because they'll have all of those pieces to make games like Squadron 42, but the PU is something that will keep evolving and evolving and evolving if they do it right. Like, they'll keep adding pieces and mechanics and game loops and little things for you to find, different planets, different worlds, alien races, and on and on and on. So Squadron 42 and all the little spin-offs that they make will fund that. So that's a good thing. So let's get into the actual development of the ships, because there's a little bit of a misconception going on, and I just kind of wanted to plug into that a little bit and kind of clarify a couple things. So a lot of people are saying modularity was supposed to come with the Retaliator. You said that would come with the Retaliator. It hasn't come with the Retaliator. Now you're rolling out the Galaxy. Here's the Retaliator room OC swapping. The actor feature team and the vehicle content team worked on this back in 2021. So apparently they hit some blockers, but like I was saying, that it's easier to make these things with smaller ships than bigger ships. The Retaliator is going to be smaller than the Galaxy, so it would make sense that they would actually keep it going with this. And at no point did they ever say during the Galaxy's concept sale that the Galaxy is going to be the first modular ship. It's just going to be one with modules. And from what I'm seeing, if the Galaxy is the one on the roadmap that I think it is, they actually are going to start work on it next year, but don't expect anytime soon. From a ship development point of view, making ships with modules makes a lot more sense than making variants. Because with the variant, you have to basically remake the inside each time, whereas a module, most of the ship is going to be the same. You're just going to have this section that can pull in and out. So you can have people that that just work on a module. And then you could have like 20 modules, but you still got the same ship. You don't have to remake the outside. You don't have to remake most of the inside. You only have to remake the box where the module fits. So modular ships might be where we go. And it's definitely something that CIG will probably start looking into in the future. So let's go ahead and take a look at the roadmap. I thought that this might be something that would be kind of fun to do. Just kind of look back and see how many ships they've released over the last couple of years. So we're going to start with April 2020. That's an arbitrary date. I just kind of wanted to go back roughly a couple of years, just kind of look at things. So these are the ships that should be in game. So flyable assets. So we've got the Drake Cutlass Blue, the Prowler. That was 3.9. That was 2020. We got the Archimedes Emerald. The Archimedes was already a flyable asset, so that was just a different skin. Origin M50 improvements. I think they just tweaked a couple of the skins on the outside. So yeah, 3.10 we didn't get much. 3.11, the Nomad was a straight to flyable. Origin 100i had been, I think, 2 or 3 years on the block. But again, you'll notice medium ship, small ship, small ship, small medium ship, small ship, small ship, small ship. Mercury Star Runner had been on the roadmap or had been in the backlog for a couple years. But again, medium ship. Asperia Talon, these are straight to flyables, I believe. Or they had like a quarter lag. Small ships. Cyclone MT, small. Nova Tank, small. This is where the exception is you've got the C2, the Hercules lineup. So you got the C2 and the M2, which are basically the same ship. This one's got, the internals are slightly different, but again, you're kind of going to modules or just kind of changing 1 or 2 rooms, adding maybe a gun on the outside, but largely the same ship. So it's saving dev time. So even back here in 2020 and 2021, CIG was already kind of shifting their focus to assets that would be in Squadron 42, and they just kind of feed us a bone on these smaller ships that were easier to make and focus on the assets so that most of the team could focus on the assets in Squadron 42, which is where most of them are. So for 314, we got the Connie Taurus, which again, we've had the Constellation in the game for a while, so that was mostly just kind of fixing up the innards so it would work. It still languished for a long time. They went on and off development on that. But again, medium ship. Anvil Spartan, ground vehicle, small. Raft, medium-sized. It's not any larger than the Connie. Amazing interior, 400i, another one, amazing interior, medium ship. Redeemer, one that had kind of been in game as a concept in the old days, but they never had a flying model. They completely retooled it. Again, I think that one was more of a feeding a bone to the community. A2, again, just kind of a remake of the C2. The Starfighters, I don't think they were straight to flyable, but again, it was only a couple month lag. The Drake Cutlass Steel, which is just a terrible idea, but they probably needed it for probably theaters of war, I would guess, but it might play a part in Squadron 42. But again, the Cutlass is a ship that we have in game. The Hover Quad was a straight to flyable. It's a bike. It's really small. This patch, we're getting the C8R, small ship. We're getting the Drake Cutter, starter. We got the Grey Cat STV. Again, it's a little vehicle. The Drake Corsair, bigger ship, but no larger than the MSR. We got the Anvil Centurion, but look how many ships we ended up getting just this year. So 2022, if you kind of go back to December, that's 10 ships that we got. So you think about the backlog is shrinking. So the Connie Taurus was backlog. The Corsair was clearly backlog. Mule wasn't. Scorpius was kind of backlog. Hull A was backlog. Vulture is going to be backlog. The Redeemer was backlog. So, I mean, they are kind of knocking out a few of these ships. Like, when they can find time to knock these things out, if it's not sucking up too much dev time and pulling them away from Squadron 42, they're kind of knocking them out. The problem is that they're kind of running out of smaller ships on the backlog. And I mean, I'm trying to think of small ships, small to medium ships, their concepts. They're more than a couple years old. I mean, I'm thinking of the Vulcan, maybe the Hull B. But I mean, other than that, pretty much anything smaller than a Freelancer, they're going to start knocking those out because they can take one dev, like if they're new, and say, hey, build this thing, kind of prove yourself. I mean, the Hover Quad really feels like one of those. But you're not going to build something like the BMM, which again, they said they had 2 devs working on that. And I'm sure the dev is working part-time on the BMM. They were actually working on other ships too, but they are kind of focusing on that one. And the other person was a lead that was kind of leaning over their shoulder and saying, okay, maybe shift that room, or do we really want to do it that way? Let's have it this way. So you really only had one person working on it the last few months. My opinion, don't have that confirmed. That was kind of what I gathered from the videos. So do you want one dev working on the BMM for what is now 170 some week sprint, or do you want them to make 5 smaller ships? And again, I've said this in past videos, but I think that the most common group size in Star Citizen is going to be like 2 to 5 people. The BMM requires like 4 to 7 to be effective. So it's kind of outside of that range. So they get a lot more bang from their buck in a lot of ways by making these smaller ships, making things that are Connie sized or MSR sized or smaller. They get a lot more bang for their buck. Or ones with crew sizes that are those 3 to 5 players or 2 to 5 players. So with that in mind, I kind of wanted to go back and go through. I basically went back a year and looked at each of the concepts. So let's look at what they've done for roughly the last year. So let's go back. So we've got the first one. This is the Odyssey. Huge ship, not in the game yet. They kind of did an extended concept on it. Not in the game. Probably not going to be in the game for a while. Again, there's no real use for it right now. Like modularity isn't in the game. Refining isn't in the game. So a lot of the things that would be the focus of this ship, again, like the Carrack, aren't really in the game. There's no real pressure to bring this into the game other than the fact that we want it, which, same. I've got one. Drake Cutlass Steel, again, easy win, medium ship, straight to flyable. Hover Quad, small vehicle, in the game, straight to flyable. The, what are you? The Expanse. Refinery isn't in the game, but I would not be surprised to see this one sooner than later. Once they start implementing refining, this will be the ship that they test it out on, because it's like a 1 to 2 person ship and it's in kind of that sweet spot. And they can kind of knock out the low end, sort of tier 1, tier 0 level of the game with the Expanse much easier than they could with something like the Odyssey or even the Galaxy, which has like a huge thing. I could see the Galaxy being like a tier 2, like the next level, but the Expanse not in yet. The Legionnaire not in yet, but super small. I would not be surprised if this is a Squadron 42 asset, and that's one of the reasons it's on there. Really small, and I think it actually is in development, and I think it's supposed to drop sometime around June of next year, but that's without the downstream teams. So this one will be worked on pretty soon, which means that we're going to be getting boarding and hacking. We know they've already got hacking coming in, so this could be a good test bed for hacking. Again, small ship, do your first test, rather than a gigantic ship that's going to require 5 crew to do the tier 3 version. Drake Mule, straight to flyable, or straight to drivable. Small vehicle. Centurion, straight to flyable or straight to drivable. Relatively small, built on the Atlas chassis that they already had. Crusader C1, they're going to start work on this one pretty soon. Again, note its size. It's not a starter, but it's a competitor contemporary with the Cutlass and the Freelancer. So it's like a starter plus. Like I'd consider the Titan a plus. So let's go on. Greycat STV. Small vehicle, straight to drivable. Drake Cutter, starter, small vehicle, 1 person, straight to flyable. C8R, small vehicle, straight to flyable. Galaxy, huge ship, only concepted. And they might start working on it next year if it's the one I'm thinking of. But if they do bring it in, it will probably be, I would assume, the cargo variant, and they'll hold off on medical and refining until later. That would be my guess of the Galaxy. So again, things aren't as bad as people think. So hang on 1 second. I'm going to show one more thing, and then I'm going to call this one. Okay, so here we are in the ship matrix. So this is basically all the ships that they have concepted and built that we know of. So you've got all the Auroras, we've got all of those. You got the 300 eyes, we've got all those. You've got all the variants of the Hornet, we have all of those. All the variants of the Connies, we've got those. All the Freelancers, we have those. All the Cuddies, those are in. Titans, we have those, or the Avengers, we have all of those. Gladiator, M50s, Starfarers, Caterpillars. Caterpillars, all of its gameplay isn't in yet. It will be modular too. Retaliator Bomber is in. Retaliator Base, which is a cargo, we don't have yet. The Scythe is in. The Idris is in, but we can't fly it. But they have flat out said, we're not giving you the Idris until Squadron 42 is out. So we we know it's there. They're just tweaking the insides, and we're not getting it until Squadron 42. Merlin is in. The Mustangs have been in twice. They've actually had their rework. Redeemer is in. Gladius variants are in. Cartu All is in. Merchantman is being worked on, but again, gigantic ship, so it might go on the back burner. 890 Jump doesn't really have a purpose, but it's in. Carrack is in. All the variants of the Carrack are in. Herald is in. Hull C is waiting on mechanics, but largely done. Hull A is in. Hull B, D, and E are not in. They're being worked on. Orion, or they've been concepted, but they're not going to drop until the economy can handle them. Orion, again, mechanics, they don't have like, and the game loop, like tier 3 mining or whatever, not in yet. So no real reason to bring it in. Reclaimer's in, and its gameplay is just dropping. Javelin is in-ish. Again, the interior isn't fully worked, but we've gone on a tour, so they've got some of it. We know it's in Squadron 42. So again, probably not going to drop into the verse until the servers can handle a ship with a crew of 80 people or NPCs. We need NPC crews before that thing will ever be effective. Vanguards, they're in. Reliance, they're in. Just as Starliner is not, but again, game loop. We don't have passenger gameplay in yet, and they will probably test that with the E1, the Spirit E1. Glaive is in. Endeavor isn't in, but gigantic ship, game loops. Saber is in, all the versions of the Saber, even the Saber Raven. Oh, I've got one. Crucible, gameplay isn't in yet. They aren't working on it, so it's going to be a while. Archimedes is in, the Emerald obviously in. Blade, Prospector, Buccaneer, Dragonflies are all in. MPUVs, Terrapin, Polaris is not in. Again, huge ship. The crew isn't ridiculous on the Polaris, but it's still very big. But there's not really a purpose. We don't really have the big capital ships like the Idris in the game yet to justify it, and the servers aren't big enough to justify it yet, but they have started concepting on it, and we're actually going to see more on that probably by the time you watch this video. Prowler's in, 85X is in, Razors are in, Hurricane's in, Defender's in, Eclipse is in, Nox, Cyclones, let's keep going, Ursa's, 600 Eyes are in, X1s are being worked on. They're small. Again, I think the reason the X1 isn't in is because it's waiting on the 600i rework. Pioneer, not in. Gigantic ship, its gameplay isn't in yet. Hawk is in. Hammerhead is in. Nova Tonk is in. Vulcan isn't, which is kind of surprising, but its game mechanics aren't really in yet. The only thing it would be able to do right now is refuel, and the Starfarer is better at it, so might as well test the mechanics on the ship that's already in the game. 100 Eyes are in, or the 100 series is in. All of the Hercules is in. Vulture is coming in next. Apollo, relatively new ship. They were working on it for a bit. It's not in yet, which is a little bit surprising because this kind of falls into that medium ship. I'll bet they push this one next year. I would be really surprised if the Apollo sits on the back burner. But you can kind of see what I'm getting at here. The backlog is not as big as people think it is. It's just these gigantic, sexy ships that people want that don't really have gameplay, or the engine wouldn't support them yet. And so we'll kind of keep going here. Mercury Star Runner, Valkyrie, those are in the game. Kraken Privateer, too big to put in the game right now. And the game loops are actually in. I mean, you could certainly land on them. Privateer kind of has the same problem that the BMM does, is that it has stores. But I think with this one, it's mostly just size and how long it would take to develop. And it's not a Squadron 42 asset. Arrow is in the game. Santokyo is not, but we just saw a reveal of it. I'm guessing it is a gray box, but they're working on that next year. SRV is nearly done. Corsair is done. Rangers. I really want a Ranger. they're going to be coming eventually. They're probably not a big priority, and they're probably trying to figure out how to do a two-wheeled vehicle and make it feel right. Ballistas, or the Atlas chassis ones, those are all straight to flyable or straight to drivable. Nautilus isn't in yet. Again, really big ship, and they don't have the mechanics of mines yet. Manus is in. C8s, all of them are in. The Inferno and the Ion are in. The Moles are in. The G12s are not, but I believe they're being worked on. But we've got enough rovers in the game. There's not really a huge need for them right now. Talon Striker in. Rock DS are in. Nomad's in. Perseus is not, which Perseus is a biggish ship. It's smaller than a Carrack, for example. I think the Perseus would be an easy win because it's a smaller ship. It's a really popular ship. It's not game-breaking in any way, and it would make a lot of sense as a Squadron 42 asset because it's a very old ship lore-wise, but as far as we know, they're not working on it. Scorpius is in. Raylan is not in. But again, this is one, it's not waiting for mechanics, but it's kind of waiting for a style guide. So just like they have to go through and create the whole style guide for the Banu race to make the Merchantman, they're going to have to make the whole style guide for the Xi'an for the Graelin. And that's what they're going to tackle with the Graelin, is they're going to kind of be, this is the aesthetic that we want for the Xi'an. That's going to take some time. 400i is in the game. Liberator is not. Again, a bigger ship, and we don't really have those carrier mechanics in. Odyssey is not in yet. Bigger ship. Some of its mechanics aren't in the game yet, and there's not really a crying need for it. Raft is in the game. Spartan is in the game. Hoverquad is in the game. Expanse is not in the game, but like I said, don't be too surprised if that one comes first for Refinery. Legionnaire is not in the game, but it's being worked on. Mule is in the game. Centurion is in the game. C1s are not in the game yet, but they're being worked on. The Steve is in the game. The Cutter is in the game. The Galaxy, big ship, modular, mechanics aren't in the game yet. So there you go. Things aren't as bad as people are doing. I just think that right now what is actually going on is that we are in the point of the patch where we have had 317 for a year now, and people are just bored with it. And I don't blame them. That is a long time to go without huge content changes. Like getting a couple ships, yeah, it's cool, but people are kind of getting to the point that they were back in 2.6 to 3.0, where people just kind of stopped playing. You'll kind of notice that content creators are getting a lot more salty because there's not new content to talk about. They can go out and mine like they have been for the last 3 years. It's just kind of, there's nothing new of, ooh, let's try this new fancy thing that just came out last month, because there isn't anything really. So I think a lot of what's going on is people are just a little bit salty, and it's fine. It's justified. We've been waiting for 318 for a year now, so people can be a little bit salty about that, and it's fine. But I don't think the issue is the focus on Squadron 42 to the extent people think it is. And I don't think there's as many ships in that backlog as people think there are. I think that the big sexy ships are sitting out there, and I think there's a good reason why they are. And I kind of went through that. So gang, that's about the end of this rant. This one's probably already too long, but I just kind of wanted to leave you with that. And if you agree with me, if you don't agree with me, let me know in the comments down below. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and see me next time. Thanks for watching.